All the way at
Okay,
the end.
good.
All right, welcome everybody. We're here. It is January, I think it's the 17th, January 17th of 2021.
Michelle, can
And
our
we have just
recordings use
had a changeover in cycles, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Jupiter made its conjunction with Saturn on December 21st, 2020. And as it did that, it opened the doorway to shift from what had been a huge long-term Earth cycle long before any of us were born into what is now an air cycle. So let's see here. I'm going to read some of my notes because it's easier to do it that way. So we're in a time frame of extreme change. If you look at the world through one of the many boxes that we have, chaos appears everywhere. A pandemic has swept around the world, killing nearly 2 million people as of January 13th. So it may be even further now. Our nation is in a transition from one president to another. And unlike the transfer of power we have witnessed throughout our lives, this one is filled with chaos and violence. Democracy as we know it is being tested, and we are here to urge it on while we wonder, where is it going? So is this going to be the norm for the rest of our lives, or will it all settle back down to what we used to call normal? From an astrological point of view, the answer is no. Normal as we have come to know it is gone. Yet there will be fragments for the next 3 or 4 years because we're in a flux. We are in what astrology calls the great mutation, or simply put, we're in a shift. So let's unpack the great mutation so we can find our footing as this change continues. Most people do not realize that astrology is a study of planetary movements and patterns, which has been going on for over 4,000 years. It's not fortune telling or hypothesis. It's based on thousands of years of research. What we are witnessing at this time is one of the great Saturn-Jupiter cycle changes. So let's just take a look for a second at our solar system. And as you look at that, you'll kind of get an idea of Jupiter and Saturn in terms of where they are in our solar system. Okay. These two planets are the last two in our solar system that can be seen by the naked eye. I am sure everyone has seen or heard about the Great Conjunction, which I will just see if I can find that slide in here. This just happened, and it's still to some degree going on. This is what we saw in the sky on December 16th. Jupiter and Saturn came together in the sky. And there are many astronomers and astrologers and theologians who believe that it was the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter together, along with Venus and Mars, that created the huge star that supposedly was seen by the Magi. Ask me about that later. I have another statement on that. But nonetheless, it does create an enormous light in the sky, and we've been lucky enough to witness it in our lifetime. So I'm going to come back now to the solar system because I want you to understand how this works. So these cycles that take place that we have been witnessing for thousands of years and that astrologers have been marking it takes place approximately every 20 years. Jupiter and Saturn will come together in a zodiac sign. But there is a greater cycle. The planets have this big cycle that goes from 180 to 200 years. Jupiter and Saturn come together as they have just now in an air sign. An air sign, the air signs are Aquarius is the one it's in right now. Then you have Gemini, and then you have Libra. And what happens during these large cycles is that every 20 years, Saturn and Jupiter, because of where they're located in our solar system, come together about 120 degrees each time. So they are traveling in the same grouping of an element that is the element of air. That's what they will be doing now. This last one, they were traveling through Earth. And these are hugely different things. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So why they travel the way they do. Jupiter travels approximately one zodiac sign a year. And Saturn will travel about one zodiac sign every 2.5 years. So it's every 20 years that they actually come together in a sign. And this kind of gives you an idea how the sky looks from our center. You see the zodiac signs. What this is called in astrology is the ecliptic, and it is just basically a zone that we've created, because these are the signs that cross a line that we've projected out from Earth that comes out from approximately the center of our Earth, which is called the equator. Okay, so that's how we identify these zodiac signs, or how they have over the thousands of years, and then studied how the planets, as they are move through these signs. Remember, these signs are fixed stars, which are far out in space, out beyond our solar system. And those fixed stars move at a rate of about 1 degree every 70 years. And that's why we can look up in the sky and say, that's the Big Dipper, or that's Orion. Or if you're aware of the zodiac signs, you can look at them and see them. So that kind of gives you a little background. And so we will go to the next step. Let's talk about elements. If we can move this. So the elements have a lot to do with a flavor. I call it a flavor. Some of you are earth signs, some are water signs, some are air, and some are fire. But you will also have in your personal constellation a variety of planets in different signs. If you're an Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, then you are what astrologers call a fire sign. And fire does relate to summer. When we look at Taurus, Virgo, or Capricorn, we are looking at an earth sign, and that relates a lot to autumn. And we're going to get into why these seasons have some value. If you're Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces, then you would be considered a water sign, and that relates to winter. And if you're Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius, you're an air sign, and that relates to spring. So looking just at that, think about jumping from autumn to spring. That's a nice thought, isn't it? I think it is. So for the last 142 years, we've been in an Earth cycle. And an Earth cycle is a cycle that has all the energies of Earth. There's a drive for security. There's a drive for money. There's a drive for possessions. We focus on creating goods in that cycle. We also tend to expand laws and government control. So we give government more control, because in the Earth cycle, like autumn, we're hoarding things, and we have a fear of loss in winter. And it's our nature to come into this space of fear of not having enough. And when we don't have enough, we tend to feel fear of others, fear of other tribes, other countries, and a fear of being poor or being imprisoned. And so what happens during the Earth cycle is a lot of these energies of fear cause us to also go to war. So this has been a long cycle. 1842 to 2020 is a long period of time. So looking at the major events over that period of time, in the 1840s in England and Ireland, they had railroad mania. And I think this is kind of a pinpoint of what this cycle contained. They were building railways. In the United States, we did the same thing. It connected the whole country. But why did we build them in the United States? It wasn't for touring as much as it was for transport of goods. and also a way to protect a nation to be able to travel from one end to the other for protection. Remember, the 1840s was before we had airline travel. that didn't come till later. We also, and the railway mania is a great example, because not only were they building railways in England and Ireland, but in addition to that, there were stocks involved, and people were going crazy buying railway stocks, and they were losing money, gaining money. And it was kind of the epitome of what has happened in this huge Earth cycle. We've gone through a whole myriad of ways to make money and lose money. We also had the California gold rush in this cycle, and also in Australia, they had the Victorian gold rush. Again, a search for goods, a search for money. We also had huge famine in Ireland, Sweden, Finland, India, China. Millions of people died because of famine, and a great migration happened as a result of famine. A lot of people from Ireland came to the United States. People from Sweden and Finland came to the United States. There was a great migration. Wars, boy, if you take the time to go look at the list of wars that took place in this period, there are so many of them. It's like you couldn't even keep up with them. In one year, you could have 8 wars going on. I couldn't even begin to make the list. But in addition to the wars, there was changing borders. Borders kept changing. Empires kept changing. And that's very typical of an Earth cycle, because we're looking to grab more because we have fear. 1890 was the first use of the electric chair. This was a period of time where invention after invention after invention came up. Every one of them were inventions that had to do with needs, goods, protection, one right after another. The sewing machine is a great example, but I put in the electric chair because that has to be the epitome of fear that is generated in an Earth cycle. So, I mean, my little list here is nothing compared to how many inventions took place during this period in time. From the safety pin to the computer, it's a vast change, not to mention dishwashers and air conditioning. And just to get down to the real facts of security, toilet paper. So it's kind of interesting what we did. And it is interesting to look at. Now, the computer was developed for mathematics during this time. It didn't get really till a little short intervention from 1981 to 1999, when we actually had a taste of the air cycle we've just entered. That period in time was when the computer became a personal computer. That's when communication took off, because the air cycle is a communication cycle. And we rapidly went, in that little 20-year period, we took this enormous thing that would take up an entire room, I mean a big room, like a 40 by 60 foot room for a mainframe computer when they were first built. And we took that and we put it into a little box. We took it from floppy drives to hard drives by the end of that 20-year period. So when you think about the speed we did things in this air cycle, that was a taste of the flavor we've just entered. Okay. Yeah. So this period of time was about amassing wealth. We developed whole new classes of wealth. Compared to the centuries before, you had never seen the classes of people with wealth that we saw in this past cycle. Completely new. Caste system changed. It didn't disappear, but it did change. We created a middle class in this cycle that had never really existed before. And housing, I just put this note because it's always nice to see. We developed really good sanitation during this period. So that's a nice thing to hear. Also during this period, of course, you're familiar with the flu that went rampant. And it was because of that flu that they actually developed amazing sanitation. So let's take a look at the breakdown of the last few Earth cycles, okay? These are the 20-year periods. This kind of gives you an idea of the flavor of the different signs as they rule a cycle. So from 1921 to 1941, we were in Virgo. Virgo is known for health. And this is a period of time where we really focused on it. Why did we focus on it? We just had the pandemic flu, the Spanish flu during that time, right before 1918, killed millions of people. And through 1941, we were also looking at engineering. Virgo is the meticulous sign. It's the engineers. They are the people who figure out how to build a bridge. And we needed to learn to figure out all kinds of things. Accounting became more precise. It's a critical period where things that we had to look at, we were going through critical needs to get things done. And the war, of course, World War II was during this period in time. We had organizations that started during this period that are fascinating. Red Cross took off during this period. Nurses in the military became known. They had their own corps developed during this period. This is just a fascinating period when you take a look at it in terms of Virgo. Virgo is written all over this period in time. Service and charity, how many people were on rations during World War II, and how much charity events were going on all over this country. And that's not to talk about the rest of the world. And service was everywhere, not just military service. People were serving in every capacity they could to try to help each other. And remember, fear overrode all of that. When we look at 1941 to 1961, we're in Taurus. Wow, what a difference Taurus is from Virgo. Virgo is about service. It's about creating things for the purpose, for good practical reasons. Taurus is about luxury. It's persistent, it's slow, it's stubborn, it's security oriented. Have to keep our stuff secure. We've accumulated. Now we got to find a way to keep it secure, but it's also very high quality craftsmanship. And if you look at the goods that were made from 41 to 61, you're going to see some stuff that you go, wow, we don't build it like that anymore. Because they had an emphasis on both luxury, on wood. You look at the automobiles that were built during this period in time. They took station wagons and added wood to the outside of the station wagons.
Yeah.
You look at the luxury cars, the Jaguars during this time. They had burl wood dashboards, absolutely exquisite. But this period of time, it was about craftsmanship, and it was also, we need to be secure. We need to take it a step at a time. We need to really be pay attention to how we handle our money and our crafts. And of course, housing was also very big during this time. This is a period of time where we, in the United States, we had federal housing begin to be something. And we started building whole suburban communities during this period in time. When we go from 1961 to 1981, we come into the Capricorn flavor. And Capricorn, you might as well just put the word corporation behind it, because Capricorn is about corporations. It's about big business. Capricorn thinks big. They don't think small, they think big. And this is where corporations just grew exponentially. I mean, if you were someone who invested in Pepsi-Cola back in 1961, you got it for a song. By the end of 1981, it was one of those blue chip stocks. So it's fascinating. Capricorn's about corporations, big business, and the big bottom line. This is where we came into, I can't remember the name of the man. He is really well known. He's the one who probably started the words corporate bottom line, but he is the person who put out books on capitalism that took off for corporations. This is where the statement, don't personalize this, it's just business, came into play. We stepped away from the handshake of Taurus to corporate, well, maybe you'll get that promotion, maybe we'll fire you, maybe we'll lay everybody off because there's more money in laying you off than keeping you on. Everything changed here. Authority figures, we went from the peace officer to the policeman, a whole different kind of security. Corporations looked to see how they could make more money, and we started to do things like looking at the privatization of prisons, which didn't happen till the last 20 years. 20-year cycle of Capricorn.
Right.
Because we went from Capricorn in 1961 to 1981, but then in 1999, we went back to Capricorn one more time. And our prison system became not just an authority, but it became big business. So you can see the flavor we're leaving. And this is a flavor of mine, it's mine. So I think, and just about, I think everybody on here was born probably in these cycles, somewhere in that, under the Earth cycle, unless you were born in 1981 or at the very end of 1980. My nephew, Michael, is in the new cycle. He was born in December of 1980 and he got into that cycle. But unless you were born then, you are born in the Earth cycle, which means that there is part of you in your consciousness that does react in ways to fear that other people aren't going to in this next cycle. There's a part of us that has a natural inclination to fear loss of our income, or fear loss of our home, or it just goes on and on. The air cycle people will not be quite that way. So let's take a look at the last air cycle, okay, to get an understanding of what's coming up. What are we going to have in this new cycle we're in? The last one took place from 1226 to 1425. And if you recognize, in that zone is the Renaissance. Nice, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Bunny. Common law really started to take a turn to allow for human rights. And we always think of the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta was actually signed several times. Its final signing was at the end of 1225, which was basically the beginning of 1226. So the initiation of the actual human rights that are in the Magna Carta did not establish itself till this air cycle came into being. And I think that is a really fascinating thing. Most of us just think Magna Carta and don't even think, yeah, somewhere in the 1200s. But it's actually was signed, I think, 5 times. It was issued more than once. Each time debates went on. So I think that's really a fascinating thing. Of course, the United States Constitution is based on the Magna Carta. And before that, there were no human rights. There was no habeas corpus. And if you don't know what habeas corpus is, that's a right that we have to know if someone gets arrested, where did they put them? Why did they arrest them? Before the Magna Carta, you could be arrested and you could lose somebody and go, why didn't he come home? And you have no way of knowing where they went. Of course, that still happens in places like Russia. In 1356, we had an interesting event take place. The emperor of the Holy Roman Empire back then was not the Pope, but the Pope had his 2 hands in the choosing of who that person would be. In 1356, they set up an electoral college. And at that point in time, the princes would come together and they would leave the Pope out of the vote. And they voted for who they wanted to rule the Roman Empire. So that was a step forward, again, away from dictatorship and away from singular rule, and a way to give more power to more people. Marco Polo is fascinating. He was an Italian. His father and uncle both were merchants who traveled to China. And as a young man, he went with them to China. He learned so many things. And when he came back at one point in 1288 or 87, he got arrested. I don't know what he was arrested for, but nonetheless, he was in prison in Venice. And there was another guy there who he was telling about his amazing travels and the things he saw. And that man could write. And Marco Polo and this man got together and wrote the Travels of Marco Polo, which when he came out of jail a few years later, I think he was in jail for 4 years, he got published and traveled all around Europe. And as a result of that, we had some really fascinating inventions that came through this air cycle, and he is major responsible for them. Paper currency, they didn't have it in Europe before then. People had to walk around with their little gold coins and their little silver coins, and those things weigh a lot. If you've ever carried coins in your pocket, you know they weigh a lot, and they're uncomfortable if you have to go long distances. They moved to paper currency because Marco Polo basically introduced it. And so it changed the entire monetary system of Europe. The air cycle changes monetary systems, in case you missed what my point was. He also brought something back that's not on here. I kind of missed it. He brought back a compass. They had never seen a compass in Europe before. Marco Polo brought one back. And that changed everything about the way they would navigate and the way they would create maps. Cartography became a thing because of the compass and Marco Polo bringing it back. Again, air cycle, travel, and understanding of it. Maps are very much an air thing. And lastly, from Marco Polo was his description of eyeglasses. And so the invention of eyeglasses in the Western world actually took place in 1290 because Marco Polo described them. They were invented centuries before in China. So, but we've always been kind of behind China on things. Okay, so paper manufacturing also proliferated. It was around in Spain before this, but it didn't actually take off till the air cycle created an opportunity for what? On paper, we communicate. Communication takes off in air cycles. Universities expanded beyond the religious boundaries. Before this period, people who went to university were going because they were priests. They were going to be ministers. They needed to be scribes. It wasn't an open thing like we have today where anybody can go to a university. You can pick any kind of major you want or multiple majors. And well, during this period, about 13 different universities opened up across Europe, and the boundaries were open. Anyone could go if they could afford to go. From 1347 to 1351, we had the Black Death, and it killed 1/3 of the population of Europe. Now, a lot of people tend to confuse the Black Death with the bubonic plague. They are not the same thing. The bubonic plague was not transferred by air. It was transferred by fleas on rats. The Black Death was transferred by air, very much like the disease we have right now called COVID-19. It's an airborne disease. Interesting that this air cycle should just open up with it. Well, it has. During this time, also, astrology really thrived. Bonatti wrote his book, and it taught people how to calculate the horoscope. And of course, astrology back then was recognized as something that kings and queens and princes and princesses would use. But when Bonatti wrote his book, lots more people learned how to do astrology, and it became much more prevalent. I expect in this cycle, we're going to see astrology come to its dignified position again. And the last one that I'm going to talk about here is the Peasants' Revolt in England in 1381. And the reason I want to mention this, yes, peasants were killed. Do not think their revolt won anything, but it scared the rich people really hard. And as a result, it made them really rethink about what are the rights that they need to give to this class, and how have they been abusing them, and how much abuse will they take before they will hurt us. So it opened a door to thought of making a change. So that's some of the background. So here's what we're coming into. So the air cycles, this is just from 2020 to 2219. And this is just the first 3. So we are right now in this Aquarius one, which will last till October 30th of 2040. And this is a period where you're going to see inventions that literally are off the hook. Things you never thought. I mean, I'm old, but even when I was young, I thought there was possibilities for things that I did get to see created. But we're going to see things that we haven't considered as a possibility.
Magnetism.
I expect something like holographic communication to become something, where right now we have this Zoomy thing. The time will come where people will literally holographically connect. And I think that we're going to see that in this period. I think it's been there for a while, but everything has to go through some kind of obsolescence before we can have it give birth. We're going to see revolution. We're seeing it right now. But the revolution that's to come in this period is one for freedom. I think it's interesting that these people who were running through the Capitol were saying, freedom, freedom. They were saying it, but they also do not realize what they were asking for was a dictatorship. So it's kind of interesting. We can be very convoluted, but there are going to be all kinds of revolutions, not just ones in government, but revolutions of the way that we do work, the way that we communicate, the way that we connect. Because Aquarius is all about ideas and connecting. It's about sharing the conversation and sharing the responsibility and cooperating to get the outcome that together we want. So, and it's very succinct. Aquarius is not all over the place like Gemini. It's very succinct. It will pick something and take a logical path straight down to where it needs to go. So this is going to be a very interesting period. We'll be sharing ideas. It will be a very progressive period. You're already seeing that movement happen. And when we say progressive, it's such an interesting word to me, because in terms of government, progressive means more of the people get more rights. More of the people get more to say. So it is a very interesting word. And we're going to have more think tanks. We're going to start realizing that think tanks do solve problems. And what I think will be really wonderful, because of the way we've developed things, they're going to be international think tanks instead of just one culture. So the diversity of America will be noticed. Libra, October 31st to 2040 through March 14, 2060. Libra is about diplomacy. It's about bringing things into balance. And it is about relationships. It's about justice and fairness. It's also about beauty. Beauty is in there with Libra, and it's about gossip and decorating and culture and arts. So Libra coming up, that period, we're going to, what progressive stuff we do in Aquarius is going to flatten down a little in Libra. They're going to try to make it more balanced. And but still, and then of course, you know, some of that, how do we make things better, that comes with Aquarius, we'll go into, well, how do we get more beautiful? How do we make our world prettier? So it will change a little. The arts, this whole period, the air cycle is always a creative cycle. There will be a lot of creativity. I'm sure Libra will be one of the periods of renaissance of the arts itself. Then we come to Gemini from April 7th, 2060 to March 2080. And here, you know, Gemini is all over the place. It's tremendous comedy. Change is literally mercurial from minute to minute. I think this president has demonstrated what Gemini can do with his Twitter feed. You know, he could be talking about somebody he doesn't like, and then he switches over to a television show, a movie. You never know what he's going to switch to. And Gemini is very much mercurial that way. But communication will really be fast paced. If we think it's fast now, I don't know. The children born in the Aquarian age of this first cycle, that first Aquarian cycle, are going to be able to meet the pace that will come in 2060. So that kind of covers a lot of what's coming up. And if you have questions, speak up and I'll do my best to answer them. Comments or questions, the door is open. I know it's a challenging time, and I know wondering about what's coming up with this inauguration may be on your minds. I believe we'll get through the inauguration, but the inauguration chart is a really, really difficult chart. And whether this president will make it through the full term is a question mark that is huge, huge in my mind, looking at that chart and looking at his chart on that chart and the changes in planetary movements that are coming over the next 4 years. So
are you expecting revolution type stuff with Biden or just health issues?
with him, I'm just concerned of an assassination. He had this chart looks very much like the John F. Kennedy chart, the inauguration for John F. Kennedy. It has a lot of similarities. And the ancients used to say, if Saturn is conjunct the sun in any period, in any of the cycles, and I use the ingress periods, which is the entrance of all the cardinal signs, and the sun 0 degrees of a cardinal sign is an ingress chart based on the city that rules the nation, then we will have an assassination. We'll have the death of the ruler. And Saturn is conjunct the sun in this inauguration chart, and it was conjunct the sun in the solstice chart. So there are some real challenges. Are there going to be revolutions? Yes. I don't see us out of that period till we're past the Pluto return, which is in 2024. So we're going to be working on figuring out who we are. And that's what we really have been working on. The second house of the United States chart, always the second house is about income, GDP, and values of the nation. And we have been working on who are we and what do we really value. That's what the revolution is really about. There will be also a revolution over the next so many years in money. It's going to change. More than likely than not, the fact that this is an air cycle and the movement that we've seen in terms of international internet communication skills, money is probably going to become electronic in some fashion. Not that we haven't already moved into some of that. Most people use their debit cards or their credit cards more than they use actual cash. I understand during this pandemic, we've had a shortage of coins.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we have a shortage of currency, but I know there was a shortage of coins because nobody's going out and doing anything. So if you do it all online, why do we have money? So it's going to be interesting how it changes. But, you know, if you're investing, you should be looking at things that are ruled by air if you're going to be investing money in something. You know, in the past period, in the Capricorn period, investing in gold, in hard metal, those were very good choices. As we come into this air cycle, gold does not fit. Metal does not fit. But there are some metals that do fit in terms of things like batteries, things that will carry
You're gone.
an electric current of some kind.
Oh, okay.
Did I hear a voice?
Yeah, you disappeared for a moment on my computer for some reason.
Oh, wow. Did everybody else still hear me?
I heard enough of it. I understand exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
All right.
So at any rate, investing in things like copper or lithium makes sense, but investing in gold may not. But think in terms of air, if you're looking at investments, the things that are going to take off are going to be solar power, anything that changes the way we live to something that is more aligned with movement or air instead of ground. I heard another astrologer say, when we go from autumn to spring, we go from looking down to looking up. And I thought that was a very positive way to look at it, because you are going to be looking up now instead of where do I root? You're going to be saying, how do I fly?
Michelle, it seems like wind power would be a natural for.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Were you gonna say something, Tom?
What about magnetism, Michelle? I
Yeah,
understand that's where we're
magnetism.
going.
Absolutely. I agree.
That's where our electricity is going to be coming from what I understand.
Magnetism, absolutely. I think anything that works with some kind of current is going to be something we would be looking at. Magnetism is a kind of current. Resonance of all kinds is a current, as well as electricity. But air and currents are aligned, because when you think of air, it flows in a current. And that, just think in terms of that. That's why Uranus is the co-ruler of Aquarius. Uranus is the antenna. And that's what we're doing. We're activating the antenna in ways we haven't in the past. Any other thoughts or questions?
Well, what do you see for Kamala?
Kamala? You know, before Biden even entered the race, I had looked at all the candidates' charts, and it was Kamala Harris's chart that I said, this is a chart that could be president. She was the only one I picked. It had nothing to do with my personal choices. It had to do with the chart. When I talk as an astrologer, I'm only looking at a chart. She has an incredible chart to run this country. She's very aligned with this country. And so I expect her to be very good at what she does. Will she become president for a second term? I've just lightly looked at that. So, and until you know what other horses are running in the race, you really don't have an answer to that question. Because it's always the charts against each other. Whenever you're competing with anyone, is your chart better for this time than someone else's?
Yeah.
You know, if I looked at Kamala Harris's chart 4 years ago for the last election, it wouldn't have activated. Just as Joe Biden's chart didn't activate till now. And he's tried. I think this is his third or fourth try.
It's a number of times, yes. Mhm.
Yeah. But it didn't activate till now. But if you take a look at his chart on the inauguration chart, you will realize that his soul was destined to be president at this time. There could be no question about that.
That was pretty obvious, Michelle, when you think about the fact he didn't even campaign in reality, other than, and when you think about it, the more Trump campaigned, the less almost Biden did. He let Trump, in a sense, destroy himself, which is what he did.
Well, you know, the spiritual beings told me a long time ago, when I used to, back 20, 30 years ago, when I used to fret over what was coming, they always said, do not focus on the negative, because evil shall devour itself.
That's the way to put it.
Speaking of, do you know what's going to happen with Trump now?
Well, I have looked a little bit forward in time, and there's some form of confinement happening with him in December of this year.
That would be wonderful. Oh, we have to wait till December? Oh, God.
Sorry. You know, they say the wheel of justice grinds slowly.
Yes, I know. It's been grinding for quite a while with this man, please.
Yeah, I think we're down to like a fragment when they get done.
Right. I mean, dear God. I mean, I'm from New York like you are, Michelle. We've watched him since we were children.
Yeah.
That's enough said.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, that's something that I say to people when they talk about voting for someone, and I'll say, well, are the people in his neighborhood voting for him? Because that's usually a pretty good sign.
Yeah.
What do they know that we don't know?
That's right.
So, any other
So
questions?
how do you see the polarization resolving itself of political parties? What do you see for that?
I didn't get everything you said, Lillian.
What do you see for resolution for the politicalization and polarization of our parties?
Well, I think that they're going, this air cycle is going to actually push anything that continues to hang on to the past power or control. It's going to force it to either dissolve or transform. Those are the options. And it basically has till 2024 to make that transformation because it's aligned with Pluto. Pluto is still in Capricorn. And until Pluto leaves Capricorn, and in the US chart, I think it's 29 degrees of Capricorn, until it leaves Capricorn, these people will probably continue to some degree to hang on. But once it gets into Aquarius, they're either going to have to explode at that time, implode, or whatever kind of plotting they're going to do. But they won't be plotting much more because the plots will be over.
Michelle, what year did you say that would be changed? I'm sorry, I could look it up.
2024. Okay. I don't have the month in front of me.
That's fine, I can look it up.
Though. I think it's like February.
Okay.
So Michelle, are you looking at a spiritualization of a hard line Bible right kind of positioning?
It's interesting. I haven't really looked, it's considered, what's going to happen with the Bible. I don't know. Aquarius is a fixed sign, and the Bible is kind of aligned with everything. When you go back to the last cycle, it was the Bible that hit as it went into water. It did not hit before that. Gutenberg had the idea of the press, but he didn't actually come up with the press until it came to the next cycle, which was water. And in the water cycle, he printed the first Bible that literally took off like, hotcakes. In this cycle, ideas will be prevalent. So there may be a real transformation in many ways, new ways of looking at the Bible I expect to happen. But people who are still fundamentalists, they'll find some kind of ground. I'm not sure. I really need to think about that to see where that grounding could be, because it's a hard cycle to ground in. Of course, you go through, the planets still continue through signs of the zodiac under these cycles, and they will ground at different points there. So it may take a while. It might take till they get to the Gemini cycle before they literally have to pull out. But I think you see the Roman Catholic Church, I think you see when this Pope became Pope, that he activated the air cycle, and they pulled him back, but he'll push it further. So as far as the Catholic Church, I have some reference points. Where fundamentalists, I don't have a lot of reference points, and I'd have to take a little more look at that.
Well, there are Catholics that are fundamentalists, my sister.
Well, that too, but I meant outside of the Catholic.
The whole spectrum.
Yeah.
In my
I'm
lifetime.
not good at that sort of thing, Anne. I need your help.
But anyway.
No, but I think what you're going to see is a flourishing of more open doors under the air cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Changes that come, I believe, in the last air cycle, and I didn't stick that in there, but last air cycle, Martin Luther was in the last air cycle.
That's interesting.
We did break down the Catholic Church as far as being ruler. Basically, the word of the Pope was important throughout Europe.
Right. That's right.
That last air cycle, and it broke down. So you're going to see that breakdown in a variety of ways in this cycle, on any and all of these religions. So every time you get an air cycle, people start to look for logic. And if you can't find the logic, they start to say, wait, what is this? I don't understand it. It makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the water cycle will bring them back, because the water cycle doesn't require logic at all. The water cycle is all about intuition and how do you feel? And does that make you feel good? It's a kinesthetic cycle. And you can convince people in kinesthetic cycles of just about anything. So, yeah, so I think you're going to see more logic pervade. And of course, that more logic also means more science. You'll see that. But this is the time I think you're going to see a blending between science and the spiritual too, because of where we've moved in consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what you just said, obviously Biden just raised to the cabinet level of science. He has an individual, I don't know if you're aware of that.
Nope, I wasn't. That's very interesting, and that makes good sense.
Okay,
That fits this cycle very well.
okay.
Yeah, the ancients used to call Aquarius the female doctor.
Oh,
That
really?
was in the time of the Egyptians. Of course, it shifted out, and the pictures, of course, were painted by men, and they put men in there, a man in there, when it's never been, a man that the original image was. However, Aquarius is considered a male sign, so that makes sense why they would have painted it that way.
It's a male sign, but it's always a woman that you see in pictures now.
You'll have to send me some of those. I haven't seen any of these
All
pictures.
right, maybe I'm the one who made that up.
Well, maybe you did. Maybe you've seen in the future and I haven't seen it yet.
I made a mistake, maybe.
Yeah, but
Well,
that
you're
is, it's
Aquarius, so maybe that's why I
considered
think
the doctor. And of course, the reason we have Aquarius as the water carrier is from Egypt, because it was during the period of Aquarius that the Nile would flood, create fertility, and therefore feed the people of Egypt. So that's why it was called the water carrier. That's why they gave that name to the constellation. So, and of course, that's healing, another statement of healing. When you have water in a dry land, that's a healing. So, any other comments? I think our time has flown.
Oh,
Laura, I should have had you doing this, timekeeper.
Oh.
That's okay. Is everybody good, or is there anything else you want me to talk about? You're good. Good to see you, Tom. It's been years. Big hugs.
his picture was there and now it's gone.
Oh, all right. And yeah, and this is my new thing. I am doing a newsletter. It will come out once a month and come to your mailbox. If you want to subscribe, just go to astrologymore.com. I am just trying to let people know. The first one hasn't gone out yet. It'll be out on the 30th of this month. And that should keep you up to date on what's coming up the following month. And it's also a great way for you to be able to push back at me and ask questions if you want to. Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Are you still, where are you? Are you still in Nevada? Tom?
Yeah.
Oh, Tom.
Yes.
Where
still
are
in
you?
Las- Still in Las Vegas.
You're still in Las Vegas. That's what I thought. Okay. All right, you guys, I'm going to close the meeting. It's great to have you online with me.
Thanks, Michelle. That was really
Michelle,
so
thank
interesting. Thank
Very
you.
interesting. Thank you, Michelle.
Take care. I'll
Okay.
figure this out, how to shut it down. And this is my next thing. Oh,
Bye, everyone. It was good talking to you all. Listen to it. Yeah.
bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Michelle.